Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. I'm Tim Laskus and you're listening to The Tim Laskus Show. This is episode 82 and this is another fantastic interview with a rider who was a rock star of the 80s. But before we get into this one, I want to notify you, give you a heads up. If you have not listened to episode 60, you need to jump on over there after you listen to this one. It's got Zach Osborne, who is the 2017 Supercross and Outdoor champion. We have Blake Baggett, Jason Wygant, who is the NBC Sports Network race commentator for the Lucas Oil Motocross. And also I've got on episode 72, Donnie Hansen, a legend, as well as Gary Simmons on episode 24. Those guys give great interviews, so if you love motocross, you love stars of the 80s and of today, jump on those episodes, episode 60, 72, and 24. And now, on to today's featured guest. Well, when I reflect on the 80s, I recall big hair, rock and roll, and pro motocross in Southern California. Well, my next guest had the best hair. He hung out with the guys of Motley Crue. I'm thinking of that song, Kickstart Your Heart. I love that. And he was one of the best damn pro motocross racers in the 80s. He is two-time MX 125 champion, Micky Dymond. He also holds another championship in Supermoto, and he's also a champion in Pikes Peak. He's done all kinds of stuff. He's done the Race Across America, which we're going to get into. And he goes into a really deep kind of, if you don't know the history of Micky Dymond, you're going to get it right now, because he's going to tell you what life was like when back in the 80s when times were good. He was winning championships in 86 and 87. He was a Team Honda factory rider. But then things turned kind of dark for a while. He was let go from Honda, and he talks about how devastating and what that was like for him during that time. He also goes into this Race Across America, which he's done 2 times, 3,000 miles from West Coast to East Coast. The most recent one he did was in 2017, this year, with David Bailey, Doug Henry, and Jeff Ward. And he gives you really insight of what it's like to race in such a grueling event that breaks you down physically and mentally. And he also talks about his new book called The Legends of the Road and a great charity that he supports, Road to Recovery. So this is definitely one of my favorite interviews, and Micky does not hold back. So get ready for a fantastic interview with Micky Dymond.
The Tim Laskus Show, in search of entrepreneurial gold. Tim digs deep into the minds of his guests. Entertaining, down to earth, and informative. Now, here's your host, Tim Laskus.
Hey, Micky, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Tim, for having me on. It's just really nice to be able to connect with somebody that still holds on to my time in racing.
Oh, so. Yes. I'll tell you, I've got stacks and stacks of magazines, Motocross Action magazines and Dirt Rider, and I think maybe even Dirt Bike. I don't know if that was out back then, but I grew up racing in the 80s as an amateur, and just, looking up to you guys as professionals. And for the listeners, I'll just kind of recap. You're a 2-time 1 in 25 MX champion. You're a Supermoto and Limited champion, a Pikes Peak champion, and a record holder. You're Baja 1000 champion. I mean, you're just a champion all around, and someone that I know many people across the world look up to. And going back to your racing career in the 80s in Southern California, what was it like growing up in Southern California around that time that you were racing in the heyday of the sport?
Back then when I was younger, we had a sort of an unlimited sort of like a menu of different racetracks all within, 60 miles. In my 60-mile radius, I had Saddleback Park, De Anza, Corona Raceway, Orange County Raceway, Indian Dunes, Carlsbad, just almost all the Southern California, like, super tracks and GP courses, national tracks, and that being said, those places at that time weren't like open on a day-to-day basis. They just held races. So there was other places that became training areas that people still ride at today. Like out in Corona, Riverside, San Bernardino, that were pretty much just open land, you know, and that's kind of changed over the years, you know, but
you were right there in the middle of all of that. I mean, you had access to all these different tracks. I remember watching Carlsbad on I don't know, ABC or CBS on television, and that just looked like such a gnarly track. But it's no longer there. I think they built some homes or something on top of that, right?
Yeah, that place has been shut down for quite some time, but Saddleback as well. Saddleback tried to reopen in a different location, but houses, developments came in, started selling houses on those properties, and that's just sort of memory now, but it was in the 80s, it was so easy to be able to ride and race on a weekly basis and have options. You know, I could race Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and then Saturday and Sunday. In my most busy time becoming a pro racer, I believe that I did that on many occasions. I raced 5 times a week. And
well, it makes sense why you were so good. You were racing that much, putting that much time in out there with some of the best riders in Southern California. You were out there just honing your skills, and then it all paid off because in 86 and 87, you were riding for Team Honda, and you won your 2 championships those 2 years. What was that like for you?
Well, if you go back just a few years prior to that, I rode for a couple European factories. I rode for Mako in 82, and then in 83, they kind of disbanded, so I did like kind of half a year and then privateer, and then I did 84 and 85 with Husqvarna, and had a pretty good couple of years. I rode all the outdoors and quite a few of the supercrosses. 85, I did both series, and rode a 250 in the supercross, and so it wasn't like overnight I became the 125 champion. I mean, it was sort of a really good day when I got a call from Dave Arnold and was offered a chance to ride for Honda in 86, and just in a sense it was a lot of work for me to adjust and become like a Honda rider. At the time, I had teammates like David Bailey and Johnny O'Mara, and I think in 86, myself and Rick Johnson went to Honda. All the teams had kind of downsized, I think, during that time. So it was a lot of pressure, I thought, and I was able to work through sort of a rocky start to that 86 season, and learned some things about myself, and definitely had a team that was like, I definitely was on the best bike in that class and had the best team behind me, and it would have been a total bummer had I not won the championship. So,
now, you said there was a lot of pressure. Was that pressure just within you that you created, or was it pressure externally from Honda going either verbally saying it, or the writing was kind of on the wall that, hey, we're hiring you to go out and win a championship? No ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, did they come out and basically say that?
They didn't have to. I believe that it was like okay, someone's going to be lucky enough to ride on that bike and ride for Honda in the 125 class. And when it became me, I certainly put that pressure on myself. I worked with Dave Arnold and Roger Coster, and I got some help and guidance, just pretty much soaked it up from David and Johnny and Rick and the mechanics on that team. I ended up with Chris Haynes as my mechanic, and he was a great coach, great guide to help me become a little bit more of a winning rider and have that mindset. And then, like I said, I had a little rocky start at the first round. I think I won the first race at the second round, and then that opened up a whole nother, it just kind of opened up more, like the possibilities now were right there in my hands. And
so was that more of a mental thing that after you won, you go, wow, yeah, I can do this?
Yeah, and you hear people say winning is easy, when you're winning, because it is. If you're already in that mindset and you demand at least a start out of yourself that will give you a chance to win, and not guess about it, but just kind of demand that. That's my standard. And then once you're in the race, and your fitness became important, so you did everything that you needed to do to be ready to win. And those guys prepared me to prepare the bike to be able to win. They were going to make the bike ready to win the best they could, but I needed to be able to ride it on my own in the race. And they helped me to learn how to develop a bike. It was a little bit more work back then to learn how to carburet a bike and to know the bike, the motor and the internals, what it was translating to through my body and through the machine, what that meant. It wasn't going to go fast and blow up in 2 laps. It was going to go fast and be solid for the entire race. And
right.
And it was going to be fast because it had the right power where I needed it, where the track needed it, to go fast, and the right tires, right everything, suspension, all that stuff. The bikes are so good now that you get just a stock one, and you have a little bit of work with suspension, and you're good to go.
Out of the box, ready to compete, for sure.
It's I'm sure at the top level it's a little more complicated than that. But back in the 80s, there were a lot more details to tedious and still things that weren't perfected, and you needed to do those things. And with Honda, I was able to learn from the best guys how to do that. And there was nobody saying, "Hey, you win or you're fired," and that was never an issue. But there was an understanding that, hey, you're on the best stuff. We've worked really hard to get you on the best stuff, and now it's up to you to go out and do your job and put the thing up in the front. And it was a lot of work to become able to do that on a every week. And there were some great guys in that class that I had to beat, and they were already winners when I got in the class. So all the things that I'd learned from Roger and David and then the management, my mechanics, and so on, really helped.
Well, it sounded like you were just surrounded by the people and equipment that you needed to go out and win. Do you also think, because the year before you went to Honda, you said you were riding 250s, is that correct?
I rode a 250 in 85 for most of the season. I rode a couple 500s. 84, I rode 500s on a 430 Husqvarna, and then a 500 Husqvarna after that. when later in the year they had a new bike come in. But
do you think that helped you when you went to the 125 class with Honda? Or hurt you?
No,
I mean, obviously
well,
it didn't hurt you because you won the championship, but
I think it helped in the ways that it could help. I appreciated, and I used those things. Like, you knew when you wanted to have a better top speed. You know, from riding a big bike, you were carrying a lot more top speed. On a 125, you had to try to squeeze out everything you could out of all the technical areas of the track to get good top speed. And so for some things I did benefit, and some things that kind of made you lazy riding a 500 when in the corners. And
yeah.
you didn't use this, you didn't use the same race line on a 500 as you did a 125. So I had to learn some things, and that took some time. And but I was able to. I was around great guys, and what really worked for me was I really had a lot of respect and appreciation for other riders that were before me. So I was able to. I was really good at just self-projection. So I could see myself doing what they were doing, and I was always around them. And growing up in California and being able to watch Wardy or Hannah or when the Honda guys were there, that was like a real treat. Like, oh my God, watch how David does this, So
right.
I was around probably one of the best times in motocross racing history is through the 80s, where tracks were changing. Supercross became a popular, and maybe the highlight. I mean, when I started racing, outdoors were more important than indoors, and now it's sort of the other way around.
Yeah.
There was a spurt through the mid 80s, and all of the courses were changing. The bikes were developing at a fast rate. So I was kind of like in the perfect little pocket of time in motocross history that a lot of things were being created at that time.
Yeah, it was such a sweet spot. Correct. And can you explain to the listeners what it was like after you won your first championship with Honda? I'm sure that the money started coming in. The sponsorships, and everybody probably wanted a piece of Micky Dymond at that point. What was that like for you to have that level of success? Does it change a person?
Well, of course, I think your surroundings, you're going to adapt and kind of be caught up in that moment. And I think I was, to an extent. I think I got a little bit, comfortable. And I still, like, my dreams and my ambition sort of settled, I guess. I got comfortable, but not too comfortable. I still wanted to start winning Supercross races. And so I did my second year, 87 on Honda, and I started well in Supercross, but I got hurt a couple times, and I didn't have like a real solid Supercross season. In fact, in all my history of racing, I never had a full, solid Supercross season. And that is one of the biggest bummers of my whole career, was that I didn't put together a season in Supercross and be really good at it and have good, solid finishes. I know I was capable of finishing very good, and even winning on occasion at that time, or like, hey, I'm, after time practice, a couple times I was fastest, and I really didn't. I was just too comfortable just being where I was and not trying to make the most of it and make more of it than was already going on.
Is this insight that you had kind of gained years later, looking back and going, "Wow, what happened to my career?" And where, those really special moments.
Yeah, absolutely. There's there's nothing like time to kind of clear the air about things, you know. Time heals all. Time, you know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know
We'll
if I
see.
believe time heals all, Mickey. I don't know if I'm a firm believer in that. You know, I lost my dad several years ago, and man, I'm still as devastated today as I was then, and so, you know, I kind of believed that before, and maybe it's different with different things, but, you know, my viewpoint on that's kind of changed a little bit. So I don't mean, yeah, over time, you know, you kind of deal with you know, past issues better, but yeah, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, you know, you're absolutely right. Some things are that's more of a, I mean, just as a racing career, some of it as simple as like, well, last weekend I should have won, you know, and time goes by and you realize that, well, I shouldn't have won. I wasn't ready to win.
Right.
So, and this is kind of a small matter in that regard, but I understand what you're talking about, and that's just this, you know, part of life. I can't go back and change it now, right. But
well, just to kind of recap, you know, for the listeners, you know, because here it is, you're 86 and 87, you're riding for Honda, you won championships both years, and then they did not re-sign you, and so, you know, your kind of, you know, thoughts on that was, you know, you didn't perform as well as maybe you could have, although you won the championships. You still think, maybe looking back, that you could have performed better, put in more effort and energy, and maybe you could have, you know, been re-signed, and then who knows. But so did you feel that, okay, Honda, you know, provided me all of the tools that I needed to win. I did perform, you know, I won the ultimate goal, which was the championship. Did you ever feel like, you know, they just maybe did you wrong? I mean, now I know you're talking about, well, I could have done better in different races. I didn't, you know, win as much, or I could have done more. But at the time, I'm sure you were thinking that, well, how could Honda do this to me?
Want more entrepreneurial tips? Go to timlaskus.com.